So let's start this. And first, I would like to thank you for accepting my invitation to be in this session today with me, because it is important for us, for me at least, to bring in different voices who are the experts in their area. And I know you're a certified coach and you are very good at what you do. We work quite a lot together, so it's a pleasure to have you here. But before we start talking about everything, why don't you kind of introduce yourself, your role, your passion, and also your interest in team coaching?
Yeah, with pleasure. First, it's always a pleasure seeing you and working with you, Biran. So it's lovely to be here. My passion is not just what I do in terms of my one-to-one coaching and training on leadership, but coaching. But it's really, my passion is on team coaching, as you know. And for me, I'm such a people person, and I do understand that. I don't know how the rest of the participants here agree with me, but it's not always easy to work with different people with different, preferences, different energy. And I was just very curious about this, how to help create these high value add teams, not just constantly thinking about performing, but actually thinking about what is the value that the team brings. And being very curious about this, I trained under Peter Hawkins, so the AOEC, so I'm certified with his systemic team coaching. And I'm also Lencioni, as you know, the Lencioni and DISC, which works really well together, but we'll talk about that later on. And it's just great because from a team coaching standpoint, it's always good to have a framework or frameworks that you can use put into your back pocket, so you can really be there in the moment and actually just apply them if you feel it's worth it. So that's kind of what it is. And what I love, again, Biran, it's the co-creation that we do together as a team. So I believe success is always co-created. So not just by the team coach, but actually by the team coach and the team. And that's what I love when we see the magic happens. Yeah. It's just really beautiful. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question about.
It does. Before talking about Lencioni, we're going to introduce that. But before talking about that, what do you think is the foundation of teaming? What is really important there?
So for me, if I really had to answer truthfully, it's trust. So for me, and just from my perspective, it's not the truth, but it's definitely from my perspective, it's you cannot have high value added team if you don't have the foundation of trust. And trust is not easy to build. It's not easy because you have to create that space to really people to speak up freely with a huge amount of psychological safety. We talk a lot about psychological safety, but it's really important to make it happen in the team so people can really speak up and people can say freely, hey, you know what, Biran, I completely cocked up, excuse my French, I completely messed up. Or I don't understand, hear me out, or I need some help. And what tends to happen is if you don't feel safe in a team, if you don't trust, if you don't have the trust in the team, you are not going to speak up. And the worst thing from my experience, the worst thing is to be in a team where people don't open up, where people don't share their feelings or their opinions or their perspective. For me, that's the worst thing. So the answer really is you need trust as a foundation of teaming. Would you agree?
I think, yes, I would agree. And it reminded me of the question when we deliver a lot of leadership trainings that we receive this question. I think it's also valuable to discuss it here. Whose responsibility to build trust? So in these trainings, when we train leaders, they always think that, oh, it is my main responsibility to build trust. But is it only their responsibility? I would like to also challenge that thinking. I feel like it is a mutual responsibility, regardless of you're a team leader or a team member. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. So I believe that to have trust, you need to have emotional intelligence. And to have emotional intelligence, it's about being aware of what's going on, is being aware of your own emotions, but actually those of others as well. So you can really be comfortable in being vulnerable yourself. So really, for me, if I am a leader, I need to role model that vulnerability, trust, Biran. And that's from my perspective. So I need to role model it so others can actually pursue it and do the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's, as a team leader, it's not always easy, so what can I show, what can I share? That's the question that I always have when I'm coaching teams. How much can I divulge? It's actually quite a common question that I have a lot with the team leader. So it really is a mutual responsibility, but it has to start, I believe, with the team leader.
Yeah. And what happens when there is no trust in the team? What are the consequences?
Woohoo! That's a multi-million question. I mean, I wish I could hear the participants, but I can almost hear you thinking here. So what happens if you don't have trust? You create toxicity. That's what tends to happen. You create toxicity within the team, and there's the four horsemen. For those who are interested, the four horsemen, four toxicity behaviors that tends to happen when there's no trust, and it's really interesting. I would highly recommend you having a look at. There's lots of YouTubes and information on that. But basically, it could be toxicity of contempt. So for me, and that's my perspective, it's the worst toxic behavior within the team, because when you have this contempt behavior, it's so toxic because people don't say anything. Because people, for me, it's incredibly rude because it's your body language, rolling the eyes, and just a simple roll the eyes. For me, it has a huge impact on me, simply because I get quite sensitive to body language.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you don't have trust, is you create toxicity. And yes, we have antidotes, and there are some antidotes to deal with the toxicity, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time and energy.
Yeah. You started talking about trust, which is kind of foundation of the model. So maybe I can share my screen for you as you're walking through that. Okay, perfect then. So go ahead.
I'm a big fan. First, I really want to say that to you. Oh, you've got end of slideshow. Here we go. See it again. I'm a big fan of Partick Lencioni's table group. So again, for those who are interested in research, his website is the table group, and he is very generous in information that he provides on the website. So I would highly recommend you go and see it. So Partick Lencioni, ex-consultant, has done a lot of information research, and he came up with this model called the 5 dysfunctions of a cohesive team. I like to call it the 5 cohesive behaviors of a high-performing team. That's how I see it, because I tend to focus on what matters and not what's the matter, if that makes sense. So as a team coach, that's my philosophy, and that's my starting point, is always thinking about what matters in the back of my mind, so I can clearly help the team just to come with some solutions. Because as a coach and a team coach, as you know, it's important to focus on future solutions. So that's the similarity between coach and team coach. So this model is great because, yes, he has the same understanding than me. The perspective of trust is the foundation, according to Partick Lencioni. And then to really have trust, he calls it vulnerability trust. So of course, if you don't have it, it's invulnerability trust. But from a positive, vulnerability trust is when you can really speak up, when you can really share your opinions. It's when you get to this point where you can, as a team, completely open up. You completely open with one another without absolutely any filters whatsoever. And it's not always easy. And if you really want my honest opinion, there's not many teams who have that level of openness without any filters. Yeah. So that's the work that I focus on first. It's really when people can share their weaknesses, their fears, their behaviors.
I think the main reason in there is might it be like because they also fear what might happen when they show their weaknesses.
That's right. Yeah.
And it is not just because of the team, but it is also sometimes because of the organization.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely right. What might be the repercussion if I'm sharing something that I don't agree with? What could happen to me? What could happen to my career progression? You're absolutely right. But it's actually quite interesting because from where I'm sitting or standing, It's my fundamental belief to actually really have that vulnerability trust where you can be comfortable being vulnerable with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the starting block. And let me give you an example. I hear so often, people saying, okay, so we're just going to have a little bit of a team meeting and we're going to start in with checking in. We haven't seen each other for weeks. So I'm just going to check in and I'm just going to ask one by one how you're doing. Okay, so that would be a typical example to start your check-in with your team. And I very often, when I observe teams, I hear that the team leader asking that question, and then someone says, maybe Biran will say, well, I've actually had a really bad weekend, really shitty weekend. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
But then the team leader just says, okay, thank you very much. Right, who's next? Are you with me? Yeah. And that always, and when as a team coach, I would not hesitate just to stop. So when I observe teams, just to stop, interrupt and say, well, I'm just going to give some feedback. Something's happened here. What did you notice? And when you're doing that, you're tapping into people's emotions. So hence the importance of having high emotion intelligence. So you always are constantly thinking about the positive impact you're having on other people.
Yeah.
So that's the trust. Vulnerability trust is crucial, according to me, to really start with a really good grounded foundations. Then if you have that trust and people can really open up and feel that they can be vulnerable because it's safe to be, in fact, we encourage them to be, then what happens next is then you can deal with conflict. And some of us, we have allergy to the word conflict. So because we have a preference of avoiding conflict, and that's perfectly normal. I would be the first to admit I'm not very confrontational. But when you are dealing with conflict, just know this, and change your mindset and just use the word healthy conflict. So it's actually quite interesting because when you're really having healthy conflict, then you can disagree, but for the sake of the team. And the worst, if you're imagining, Biran and team, if you're imagining a dichotomy or a spectrum, on one hand, you've got aggressive. So when you're dealing with conflict in an aggressive way, and that's not very nice, is it? Yeah. And then the opposite is when it's artificial. So when you have artificial harmony. And that's not good for the sake of the team either. So what we mean by healthy is being balanced between the two and being in complete harmony when you're really dealing with conflict. And that's about, recognizing you just would not hesitate. And Biran, I know you have a lot of courage there. You would not hesitate to disagree. You would not hesitate to challenge, to questions one another. But that's in the spirit of finding the best answer. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. So you're doing it with the spirit of finding the best answer. You're not doing it because of my ego and wanting to, hear my own voice. You're not doing it for that reason. You're doing it because you really want to dig deeper in terms of some of the decisions that we are about to make as a team. So when you have that trust, you can really have healthy conflict because it does matter. It really does matter.
And at the same time, when you have that trust, when you are in a conflicting situation, you don't personalize it because it's not about you, right? So
absolutely right.
Then, but if it is, as you mentioned, artificial harmony, the artificialness in that harmony already damages the trust.
That's right. That's right, because then toxicity gets in the way. So, for example, you could be stonewalling, and when you're using that stonewalling toxic behavior, you're just not saying anything. So do you agree? And that's it. You're just deadpan. When you're contempt, you're actually rude, so you can roll the eyes. Body language is just so incredible, and it has a huge impact. And virtual or face-to-face, by the way. Okay. So healthy conflict matters to find out the truth, to find out the best decision, the best perspective for the sake of the team, like you said so beautifully. So when you have vulnerability trust, people can really speak up and actually share their own thoughts. Then you can actually deal with healthy conflict when you agree for the sake, or disagree for the sake of the team. So you can actually really speak up as well. What happens next then is you have a much higher level of commitment. Mm-hmm. It's not ambiguous. And what we mean by that, what Partick Lencioni means by that, it's when you really are able to achieve genuine buy-in around important decisions. So when people are just, okay, you've heard me in the healthy conflict, I've heard you, maybe we disagreed, fine, for the sake of the team, but it was great just to hear you out. Now that we've had that, we can actually commit and go behind the decision that as a team we have made, even if you have not agreed from that decision. Are you with me? So that's because you ensure that all opinions and ideas are put on the table and considered. What tends to happen is that you are confident that we have made the right decision. And I hear so often, Biran, you know, because we don't have this trust or conflict. Oh yeah, can you believe we're doing this? I don't agree with Biran, but I'm too. And that happens a lot, and then we start to blame.
Yeah,
that's another toxic behavior, which is not nice.
In one of our leadership trainings, I used to share this quote. I think that is definitely referring to what you've been saying. It's not about agreeing as leaders, but it is about aligning. So you might not agree, but when you have healthy conflict, or when you have enough of a trust, it is the alignment that you need within the leadership team, not just agreement, right?
I absolutely agree with what you've just said, and the word alignment really resonated to me. And isn't it great? I don't know if you've ever been in a team where you create that alignment. It's fantastic. You create so much energy, and positive energy as well, that you get excited about joining the team and actually seeing where we can be. It's just beautiful. So yes, of course. So then we align, we commit, we get the buy-in, and you know, for the sake of making the right decisions for the team. So what then tends to happen is if you have trust, if you can deal with healthy conflict, and we commit and we get behind every decisions that we make, the next level up is holding each other accountable. And that's actually, for me, if you ask, because I'm hoping you won't ask me, I'm going to share with you how I feel about that. Out of the 5 behaviors, I think for me it's the one that I found I struggle the most with, Biran. And simply because when you created that accountability, holding each other accountable, really what it means that you're not relying constantly on the leader to actually go and generate the feedback, to go and actually hold each other accountable. What you're doing, because we hold each other accountable in a collaborative way, where we are all transparent, where we are all working on par with each other, then we can actually say, Biran, I needed that data record that you promised me. It hasn't happened. When am I going to be able to get it? Or tell me what can I do to actually make it work? When you're doing that, then you're having one-to-one conversation with your team members, and you're not constantly having to ask, you know, the top lead to actually deal with it. It's exhausting. That means you rely on your leader much more than you should, you know. So that's why it's important. But of course, you've got to be courageous and actually quite bold to hold each other accountable, which is not always easy. So that's when you need to really know how to give constructive feedback, you know, and to have a positive communication. And that's when it's really important to be self-aware in terms of our communication when you're holding each other accountable.
And if it is not there, like the self-awareness, the trust, the openness and transparency, if it's not there, when you try to hold each other accountable, the other people might say, this is not your place to say, you're not my manager, you're not, and that might be the reaction. Then whatever you're trying to do will backfire.
And that's actually another topic you've just made me think about is, I mean, your native country is Turkey, mine is, I would say, France. It's actually quite interesting that culture gets in the way. Would you agree? You know, when you so I'm thinking, I can only just say from my experience from a French country, we're a bit more hierarchical than we are in the UK, for example. Would love to hear about Turkey, but it's the same.
Yeah, pretty much the same. Yeah.
So as a consequence, like you say, you know, I'm asking you, team peer, to actually tell me what to do. I'm asking that it's going to be the top leader, and that's a culture that you need to really recreate within the team. If you really want to create this high value add team, you need to make sure that you set the right ground rules. The ways of working in the team are very, very important, and that's really important, especially when you want to hold each other accountable. Because too often, Biran, when you're working in a team, we just assume our ways of working. We assume it's a given, but it's not. So it's really important to be grounded and really set those ground rules with the team to be able to achieve high standards. Yeah. So that's the next level up. So of course, if you hold each other accountable, what you do then, the next level up is you have to focus on results, right? And this is really about not focusing on the individual needs and agenda, which tends to happen if you don't have all these 4 underlying behaviors. So if you don't have trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, what tends to happen is I don't feel safe and no one cares. So as a consequence, I'm just going to focus on my status and my ego. And I'm going to focus on my career and not the team's common purpose and needs. And then what tends to happen is then we become siloed, and we're just doing our bit, and I don't need to know what Biran's doing. I'm just going to be doing what I bit, where in fact, when you're really working together, I need to understand whatever I'm doing might have a repercussion on Biran's work, etc., etc. So it's really interesting just to not focus on individual needs, but actually to focus more on collective results that define the team's success. And for that to happen, you need to have all 4 behaviors, like I've just explained to you. What's interesting, Biran, sorry, I interrupted you. What's interesting is, from my experience, if you just turned the triangle upside down, what I see too often in new teams is the tendency to focus, right, okay, what are we here to do? What's the result? What's the task that we need? Who's going to do what? Without focusing on building trust. So what tends to happen is we focus on the wrong sets of behaviors. And when we are focusing on results first, it's very rare, and that's from my perspective, I might be wrong, but it's only my perspective, I don't see many teams focusing on what's the common purpose. What's our common goals? What are we here to do? And whenever I do some team coaching, first I create the trust, as I said to you, but then also I would actually start my session as well on creating this common purpose and vision, which is important.
That makes me think of, especially with the new agile ways of working, and also matrix organization structure, that happens quite a lot, because now the companies are moving towards to just setting project teams that are not reporting to each other, and those that timelines are shorter. So they just focus on results and delivering the results, but not building the trust or the psychological safety in that team. So I think that might be also triggering the approach that you've been mentioned.
And quite rightly, you said also, I mean, we work in this world that we live in, how exciting it is, but we do live in a 24/7 work. At least that's my understanding. So, for example, I work with different countries. So all my clients are based pretty much around the world. So if I'm not careful, I would have calls first thing in the morning and then right late in the evening. So as a consequence, I don't have, I could easily, if I was leading a team in a corporate, say to myself, I don't have time to create trust. I'm just going to focus on task. And unfortunately, that's the wrong start. You have to create sufficient trust at the beginning, so we can, yes, it takes time, but it's amazing energy that we create together as a team to really be able to deliver the common goals. And another thing, Biran, teams are systemic. Does that make sense? It's really, you have to constantly ask yourself, what's the purpose? What's the common goods that we want to create, and for whom? Because every team, they have many stakeholders. Don't assume that it's just if I'm in finance, my stakeholders would be the CEO. Absolutely not. It's really about focusing on all the different stakeholders within, but also outside in. So you will have to think about even your investors, who's investing in your company. You would have to start thinking about who's your customers or your clients. And when you are thinking about all this, this system around you, you can start building this successful team, but you have to have that in a systemic way to understand. So even more important really to create trust with each other.
So thank you for walking us through the model. I think it provided a greater understanding about it. Another aspect of it, how do you use it as a team coach? Like, what does this tell us as coaches or team coaches?
Yeah, it's a great question. I use it in different ways. So how do I use this model? One is Partick Lencioni. So when you're certified, there's a questionnaire that your clients, your participants can fill in. And it's a very, very robust questionnaire. It takes a bit of time, but it's really amazing. So it's not individual, it's from a team results, and the questions are asked around, according to you, from a scale of 1 to 5, where are we with the trust, and etc., etc. But it also takes into account your self-awareness. Do you remember I said to you, how you deal with conflict? You have to be self-aware about how you communicate. Same thing with accountability and commitment. So what it takes into account is your communication style from an individual perspective, but it puts each of the team into that circle. It's under DISC. And then you can actually then, from a team picture, just understand, okay, so where are we in our communication preferences? And you know, what's missing? What's the gap? Maybe that's why. So it goes really well together. So Lencioni goes really well with a preference, a person. I don't like to call it personality test, but it really communication styles, let's call it.
Communication style. So you use it with this, combined with it.
Yeah, I do. And so they fill in the survey. Then what we can do is we can give them a very high level snapshot of the survey based on their individual needs. Okay, so it's very much structured about what they're saying, what's their strengths, and what the DISC survey tells about themselves. But then I don't reveal the team score until we see them face to face or virtually. I tend to do face to face. So when I reveal it, it creates so much rich conversation, you know, about, oh wow, okay, so it's a RAG status. So you've got basically red when you've got to really, it's a bit of a panic you've got to focus on. Then you've got amber, it's okay, but we can do better. And then you've got green, fantastic, it's going really well.
So the diagnostic is telling the perception of the team, what they are good at on these different levels, and what are the development areas.
That's great. Yes.
Okay.
And it's a great sort of, I believe, as a team coach, that you need to have some diagnostic before you can actually be in the team. So that's how I use the Partick Lencioni. It's really as a start of a conversation in terms of what are the actions for us, what matters for the team, so we can focus on some solutions to help this team become the high value creating teams that they want to be.
So another question that came to mind is, like, when you reveal the answers or the results of the questionnaire, what happens when people don't agree? Or when they see the results, they are shocked.
Yeah. So it's really important for people to be able to speak up freely. Yeah. It's really important for people to speak up freely. So there are many different ways in the moment that you can do. You can create some pairing discussion. You put them into different groups to have a conversation about what it means to them. You can actually maybe even self-evaluate. I've done that in the past. So I've got the score, but I'd like you to tell me, where do you think we are? And so we do that. There's so many different ways that we can do it. So nothing should be too much of a surprise, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course it happens. And if it does, you really have to role model the trust, the vulnerability trust that I shared with you at the beginning. So hold that space for people to be able to speak up freely, openly, with no judgment. And when you're doing that, then they really want to, I feel that you're framing the real challenge for the team. Does that make sense? And when you're a team coach, because I'm sure, well, I'm hoping our lovely participants might be asking, so what's the difference between coaching and team coach? I think for me, it goes really deeper in terms of the challenge for the team. So it's about framing the challenge. And as a consequence, Biran, I believe, because I'm a team coach, it has made me a better coach.
How come? Tell us more about that.
It's helped me to be a better coach because, and that's my perspective, it's not really just about asking questions, asking powerful questions, and of course telling from time to time, but it's not about asking questions, it's about challenging as well, and challenging with some really good ground rules that you have set for the sake of this wonderful team. And what I've noticed about myself is maybe I was holding back as a coach, thinking, well, I don't particularly want to challenge too much. I'm just going to ask questions and it's up to them to actually come up with their own solutions. But when you really are a team coach, you've got to be in the moment. You've got to hear everything that is being said, and you have to use your judgment call, the nudges, just to help them think about what they've just said and how they've said it. So it's really important to be in the moment, even more, I would say, to really challenge the perspective, the thoughts, what's going on, so they are constantly aware of how to be the team they want to be.
From my experience, whenever we do team coaching, just because of what you said, we choose to have two coaches in the room. Is that your experience as well?
So it's actually interesting. Yes, I absolutely would agree with that, because you've got one who could focus on the process, because of course, like coaching, you are responsible for the process. You're not responsible for the content, but you are responsible for the process. Then the other coach can act more of I'm just going to read the room. I'm just going to notice the energy in the room. And then if we worked really well, as you and I work really well, we can see what's going on with different angles. And that's what magic happens. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
And also it beautifully role models being a team in front of the team.
Yes. Yes, that's true. That's very true.
I don't want to think about that the team coaches are not working well together, because you're there for a purpose, but
yeah, but it's actually interesting you say that, because you've really got to trust the other team coach to do that. It's not about status and ego. It's we're here together to actually make this team the high value added created team that we believe they can be. And as a consequence, it's you've got to really trust that. So you're absolutely right. It's about role modeling it.
And it is also like the same triangle is valid for the team coaches, right? So the trust, conflict, and what we know from supervision and coaching, there is something that is called parallel process. Right, so whatever is happening in the team can happen between the team coaches as well, because of the parallel process, right? So it requires another level of awareness by the coaches to notice that possible parallel process.
Yes, and just let me just show my vulnerability here for a minute, because like I said, and I do believe the Lencioni works really well with DISC, or at least another semblance of communication profiles. Because I might have a preference, Biran, as you know, and if I'm not careful, I might just absolutely take the reins and direct without necessarily thinking what's going on for the other team coach. So it's really important not just to trust each other, but also to be really much, like you said, aware of our preference in terms of how we are in this space that we are providing.
So just before we go to the Q&A section, I'm actually, I have two questions for you that I'm very curious about. First one is, what is your worst experience with any kind of, this was the worst team coaching session that I've had? That is the first one. And of course, the second one is the best. What is your best experience? If you can share some of your experiences with us.
I'll start with the worst then, shall I?
Let's do that. Rip the band-aid.
Okay. Yeah, that was really worse. So what happened is I was asked to coach the wider team. So it's not just the team, but also the team and the wider team working with them.
Okay.
And there were different countries representative. So the company was by country. So that's what happened. What I was not aware that there was a huge, I'm not going to name countries, but there was a huge friction between a particular country with others.
Okay.
So what happened is they became the language that they were using was actually very detrimental to the benefit of the coaching situation. I had two people walking out of the room. Yeah, so two people walking out of the room and saying how outrageous this is. I'm not going to be told. I'm not going to be spoken that way, etc. So the best way I handle it, and I still think it was the best way to handle this, is I then said, right, we're just going to pause, we're going to have a break, and then we'll come back and we'll just do a debrief. And what I did is I run outside of the room to go and speak to those two people who left. And I just said, please, can I just have a quick conversation with you and tell me what's going on? And I was really I was coaching them just to understand their point of view and how they were feeling. And so we had a long session, probably a bit longer than I thought, but I managed to get their buy-in again and get back into the room. And what I did is I used that as a real life experience in terms of what tends to happen when we create toxicity. Not blaming one another, culture or no culture, and it was an amazing. And the feedback was one of the best feedback I got in team coaching, because not only did we talk about these 5 behaviors using Lencioni, but actually we saw it. and as a consequence, we can actually apply it immediately. But that was really tough for me, because as I said to you, my preference is not to be confrontational. But I had to learn a lot, and that was in my younger years as a team coach, and as a consequence, it's helped me learn so much. Let's just go.
It also sounds like your best experience, by the way. But what is your best experience?
I'm still in touch after all these years. I'm still in touch with this person, So one of them. The best one was actually recently. I was in Belgium, so I was with
a couple of weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago. But that was amazing. It was actually with a C-suite team, and it was absolutely great. So I'll be honest, I didn't use Lencioni for this one. I used something else, but more about the 360 feedback, because that was the need from the team. And what I did is I made something really stand out, because I had this. So I used leadership circle profile for 360 feedback. I've got it here behind me. So I've got this huge giant mat. It's a very complex, really, really complex model to use. But for me, it's one of the most powerful model with Lencioni. So it talks about the competencies that is required for you to be an effective and performing leader. But it also talks about your beliefs and perceptions of yourself that sometimes gets in the way. So it's really quite deep. And what I saw is, when it was very somatic, because when I asked them to stand up, they were really living it and breathing it. They were sharing their vulnerability, and they were actually agreeing and disagreeing, and they were actually, so it was very healthy. And they were doing all those behaviors that I was telling you about, and it really made me smile. And what I can see is they were constantly focusing on future solutions. So what can we do, team, to look at this gap? And it was just so beautiful when they were standing in their true strength, noticing, the gap that they were each one of them having, because it was different, and how to get there. Absolutely remarkable in terms of team coaching experience. When you really want a team to take responsibility and hold each other accountable, that's what they did.
So I hear that like in one-to-one coaching, somatic experience in team coaching brings another dimension.
Oh my gosh, it really does, because you can, there's so many exercises you can do. Your stakeholders, who are your stakeholders and how far are they from you? Go stand. You're right, it creates such energy, but also it makes you aware of the space, of the connections that you have with people, and how far the space are sometimes. So it really does help you think about, oh shit, I didn't realize the space was actually quite long on this one with Craig, for example, because I don't see you. So I might have to focus on Craig then in future much more than I will focus on Jansu and Alasdair. So it's actually quite interesting, because it really creates, you're absolutely right, something magic when that happens. Yes, I would highly encourage to use more somatic exercises.
Any tips for coaches in the group about team coaching?
I think it's a good question. Don't hesitate to challenge. That's what I would say. Do not hesitate to challenge, but make sure you've got trust, because you cannot challenge if you haven't got trust. I think too, it's just really be in the moment. So yes, you've got all these lovely models, frameworks, but just be in the moment, really truly listen, the space, the body language, the connections of each different one, the words they use, how they use it. Just be in the moment and really give feedback immediately in terms of what you're saying. And I think number 3, if I had to give you 3, always nice in threes, make sure that your team has a common purpose. Make sure there's a common goal, because sometimes it's not easy if you're not entirely sure which direction your ship is going.
Okay. So thank you very much, Kat, for sharing all your experiences with us and perspective.
And first, thank you for listening, by the way. Thank you. I hope it wasn't a ramble.